Bobby Ray asks, have you ever experienced a supernatural event? I'm about to tell you a very personal and a very scary story about something that happened to me when I was living in Spain. People, we did it! 10,000 book lovers have joined this little corner of the internet, and I just wanted to make a little video to express how grateful I am to all of you, whether you've been here since the very first sort of awkward videos, or you just recently stumbled upon this channel yesterday. I just want to say thank you so much for subscribing. Seriously, I mean, 10K is a bit mental for me. That's like a small town of book lovers. And I was thinking the other day, I remember when I first launched this channel, and I told my cousin that, I've launched a YouTube channel all about books if you want to watch it, And so he watched my first video, and then I had 1 view. And then I woke up the next day and I saw that I had 2 views. And so I called up my cousin and I said, did you watch the video again? And he said, no. And I was just like, someone I don't know has watched one of my videos. What? So anyway, to celebrate, I asked you to send me any questions that you might like to have answered. They could be bookish, they could be personal, whatever you wanted. And you sent over some, and I'm excited to go through them now and read them out. So the first question is from Olga Curious. And Olga asks, could you elaborate on one thing that you love about England and tell us what you hate about England? But you're not allowed to say the weather or food. And I think that's very often what people talk about when they talk about not liking England. They talk about the weather. But first off, I just want to say this one. I know you told me not to talk about food, right? I will answer your question. I have to start by saying that British food, right? Hot take. British food gets very bad PR, and I'm not saying that British food is as good as Italian food or French food or Mexican food or even American food, but British food is always painted as this kind of like pirate gruel, no seasoning, just disgusting slop. You're going to England, be careful about the food. That is pure propaganda. That's propaganda. But no, like British food is more like beef Wellington and Sunday roasts with, thick steak, like a thick cut of beef, Yorkshire puddings and gravy and crispy potatoes, Cumberland sausages, and then sticky toffee pudding afterwards, and apple pie. And also, by the way, sorry I've started off with this energy. I'm sorry I've started off with this energy. But, British food is very important to me. Apple pie, right? Some of you are going to be going, apple pie? You got to be kidding me, right? That's American as apple pie. No, actually, apple pie is British. You don't believe me? Look it up. Look it up. Sorry about the American accent. I love Americans. My wife's an American. I've got no choice. So, yeah. Sorry, Olga. I'm doing the exact thing that you asked me that you asked me not to do. What do I like and what do I dislike about England? So the thing that I love most about England, I think, is the sense of humour that people have. I like the brand of humour that is not exclusive to England, but it's most prevalent in England, and that is like a self-deprecating, very dark sense of humour. Whenever I go back to England, I've had occasions where I've left parties or family gatherings where my gut is literally aching from laughing so much. So I'm always having a good time, always having a laugh when I'm in England. And I don't know what it is that makes our humour so dark. Maybe it's just a sense of hopelessness. Do you know what I think it is? I think that sort of goes hand in hand with what I dislike about England and Britain, really. I think because the sense of humour that we have is all about tearing yourself and others down. Like, that's the big joke, that we're all sniping at each other all the time. It's almost as though we are prisoners to irony and sarcasm. And that sometimes feels like it can bleed over into real life, and we just can't take anything seriously. We're never, ever, it's the cardinal sin. You must never take yourself seriously. You must never approach anything with any kind of earnestness. It's always got to be like a little bit ironic. It's kind of like the polar opposite of a lot of Americans. Don't get me wrong, Americans are very funny. It's not true that Americans don't understand sarcasm or irony. You know, they've got some of the best stand-up comedians. They probably do have the best stand-up comedians in the world. So there's no question in American sense of humor. It's very high tier. So for example, if I was in England and I wanted to do something a little bit unusual, like start a YouTube channel, for example, or start up a voice acting business, everyone around me, because of the joke, right? And remember, we all tear each other down. They would all sort of question, like, "What are you doing? Like, what you're gonna try? You're gonna try and do something a bit different?" Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, you can start a YouTube channel. Oh, well, you're going to be famous. You know what I mean? It's like, no, I'm not going to be famous. Oh, is that what you're trying to do? You're trying to be famous. Yeah, you're trying to be Jake Paul. Anytime you try and step out of the norm, anytime where you decide that you want to achieve something in England, I always feel like it's best definitely to keep it to yourself. Don't tell anyone about it, because it's going to be met with absolute mockery. And it doesn't even come from a mean place. That it doesn't have any malice attached to it. We all like each other. It's just that when you take yourself seriously, it's like you're betraying the joke. And people kind of reactively have this attitude of like, who do you think you are? That reaction doesn't exist as much in America. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that it was America that put a man on the moon. And not England, because if an Englishman decided that he was going to try and put a man on the moon, then everyone would have pointed and laughed. They would have gone, "Oh my god, what are you going to do? You're going to build a rocket? Oi, Dave! He said he's going to put a man on the moon." Yeah, good luck, mate. Good luck. All right, next question. Sorry, I got a bit excited there with the first question. Next question is from Carl Stewart. So if you had to choose between these trilogies, The First Law or The Farseer, which would you pick? Fantastic question. Oh, and by the way, Olga, you had a fantastic question as well. I really love The First Law. I love the Farseer trilogy. I've actually only read the first 2 books in the trilogy on the Farseer, though, and it's strange because I would say these 2 trilogies, neither of them really have like a really strong plot. The First Law, its focus is more on creating interesting characters and funny dialogue, and I think the thing that I like most about the Farseer trilogy is the immersion you feel when you're reading it and the sensory details that Robin Hobb includes in the language. You feel as though you're really there. So I have to say, because I'm a character guy, right? I'm all about the characters. The First Law is my favorite between the 2 so far. But remember, I've only read the first 2 books from the realm of the Elderlings, so you know. But yeah, right now, The First Law. I love Joe Abercrombie. Next question from Tim Burbage reads, can I ask, how did you get into audiobook narration? So this is something that I always wanted to do, honestly. I was told a few times in my life that I should try it out. You know, maybe I'd be on the phone with someone. Sometimes I'd even be like ordering food or something like that, you know, ordering a pizza. And the person would go, do you do like voice acting or anything? And so it was always in the back of my mind. But then one day, from my full-time employment, a job that I'm still at today, I got a bonus at the end of the year, right? And I totally wasn't expecting to receive this bonus. It just sort of came out of nowhere. I said to my wife, like, do you mind if I give this a go and buy a microphone and buy a preamp and get the software and, you know, sign up to the websites and to convert So just out, you can't see it, but I've got like a walk-in closet over here, and it's all like padded out with soundproofing and everything like that. So that will cost money as well. And so I said to her, "Do you mind if I just put it towards that?" And she went, "No, go for it." That's what I'm talking about. That American sort of like can-do attitude that they have over here. So she was like, "No, no, go for it, go for it." So then I went for it. And I will say this though, my wife was a little bit nervous because I put so much time and effort and money into this. She admitted to me afterwards, she was like, "Oh, I was really scared that you wasn't going to get like one job." And you would be like sitting there like a little boy on his birthday party when no one showed up, like, so she was a bit nervous about it. I was I thought I could get something. I thought I could maybe get some audiobooks, and it started off really slow. I was taking really long jobs for like $5, but I knew in the beginning that I wasn't going to be. The only advantage that I had as someone with no experience, and there were other people that had the same voice as me that had years of experience. The only thing that I could do is just be in the beginning a little bit cheaper, take some of the jobs that they didn't really want, and just build up from there. And then slowly over time, I increased my prices, and then that's basically how I got into it. So I use websites like Fiverr and Upwork. And there's some other like voice specific freelancing websites as well that you can join onto. They're paid, so you got to pay like an annual subscription, and you sort of like try and get the jobs and win them. And so yeah, it is competitive, but that's basically how I got into it. And my favorite thing to do, I do all kind of like voice acting and stuff like that, but my favorite thing to do is like giving characters voices, whether that be in like independent video games or in audiobooks as well. I really, really love reading audiobooks. I wake up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. I do like 3 hours of recording every day. And then because I work from home, I just walk out of there. I sit at this desk. I've got a desk down here. You can't see it. I sit at this desk. I do my full-time job, work all day. And then I read and I read and I read and I read. And then I tell you about it. Next question is from Luana Mendez. And it says, "I'm curious if you have another job outside of YouTube, and how do you find time to read and put out awesome videos?" Thanks for saying they're awesome videos. That's nice. And also tell us more about your audiobook narration, right? So I told you about that part, and how you got into it. Right. So, yeah, mentioned about the audiobook narration. So hopefully that answers your question. And do I have another job? Yeah, definitely. So I've got the narration and also like a full-time regular job. I don't really talk about it because um, I'll be honest with you, it's not very interesting. So I'm not going to go into that. Oh, how do I read so much? So I, I'm actually a very slow reader. I've got to admit. Um, I'm like they have like the average reading speed for people. My reading speed is way below the average, and I think it's because I sub vocalize when I read, and I actually act out scenes in my head. I'm sort of acting it out in real time. So if they pause, I kind of pause and I imagine them pause. It plays out like a movie when I'm reading. And also because I'm an audiobook narrator, I think I've kind of like gotten into the habit of reading out loud now, and now I can't go back. And so it's like, yeah, so it really slowed down my reading, but I enjoy it very much. And so I just spend a lot of time doing it. I read every day when I'm on the treadmill. I just walk for like an hour on the treadmill, and I read on my Kindle when I'm on there, or maybe I'll listen to an audiobook when I'm on there. So that's an hour a day. And then I'll read on my lunch break. And then sometimes I might even sneak in a few pages if I'm waiting for a meeting to start at work, or I'm waiting for a call or something like that. I might sneak in a couple of pages there. I listen to audiobooks when I walk my dogs, and I read at night as well. So yeah, it just really comes down to a lot of reading. Audiobooks help out a lot. definitely. Whenever I'm doing anything that doesn't require too much thought, like I say, walking the dogs, washing the dishes, cooking, anything that doesn't really require too much thought, I'll be listening to an audiobook. This next question is from Millie C. She says, do you have a loss of innocence book, something that you read in middle school or high school that dealt with dark, more adult themes? Maybe poverty or violence, or just some weird topic which felt like it stripped you of something that you couldn't name? What a question. The first book that I think comes to mind is The Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I read that when I was quite young. It's a lot of people have read this. They probably read it at school or something like that. But it's an allegorical story about a group of English boys. They're all stranded on a tropical island, and at first it feels like it's a bit of an adventure book. You know, there's no parents, there's no societal rules. It's just raw freedom to be themselves. But because they're so young and they haven't fully internalized the structure of the society that sort of raised them, things quickly spiral into chaos. And what follows is like just absolute carnage. A lot of the boys just start to surrender to their darkest impulses. And the story unfolds. These aren't spoilers. Again, this is what the book is about, right? But the story is, I think, primarily through the perspective of one boy who's trying to maintain some sense of order and normality while the group as a whole starts to succumb to their more like animalistic urges. And I think that this made me aware of a fear that I didn't realize that I had, and I've mentioned this before on the channel, is that there's like a thin veneer of civility that's separating us all from just being animals. And when that veneer is stripped away, I think it can feel like exciting and intoxicating. I've been in situations where I've wanted to give into that, you know. Maybe I've been at a football match where, you know, there's some rioting going on and I kind of feel like my blood surging, and you feel like, all right, it's, you know, it's us against them sort of thing. That same intoxication that sort of leads to the madness is scary as well, you know, when you think about we've all got it. So yeah, I think this is the first book that ever introduced me to that idea, and made me thankful that we live in a society. So this is a question from Spiciest Pepper. Great name. What made you start a BookTube channel? So this is a classic question. I started my BookTube channel because I decided to read the full extended multiverse of The Dark Tower. And I just wanted to document the journey, but at the same time, I kind of wanted to connect with others who had read it, or maybe even were thinking about reading it and wanted to read along. And so beyond that, I've just always loved reading, but it feels like more that feels like more and more of a rarity these days. And it's hard enough, I think, to find people who really enjoy reading, let alone people who share your taste in books. So you might meet someone, I don't know if you've ever had this, where like you meet someone and you find out that they read and you go, oh, right, what do you like? And then it turns out that they only read like Jordan Peterson or something, and you go, ugh. Or maybe they only read romance novels or genres that you're not particularly interested in. So finding people who not only love reading, but who also enjoy the same books as you is a real challenge. And I think there's a lot of bad things about the internet, but one of the great things about the internet is that it helps you find your people and your tribe, you know? And that's really a big reason that I started the channel. On top of that, I just genuinely enjoy the creative side of making videos. And I think that from what I've heard, that makes me a little bit of an oddity in the booktube space, because I think a lot of people like recording books, they like they like recording videos, they like reading the books, they like talking about the books, but they hate the editing. I always hear that from other booktubers. Oh, I hate the editing, or I outsource my editing to other people. And for me, I love the editing. Like I really enjoy it. I like experimenting with effects. and you can't see it, for example, but there's a microphone right here, right next to my face. Look, I'll show you. Look, it's going to magically appear. Huh? But I found this trick to make it invisible. And so setting up, I like setting up the lights. I like setting up the microphone. It's all part of the fun for me. But most of it started from just a desire to want to find people like you and people that share my love of books so that we can all just sort of geek out about them a bit. That was another great question. So this next question is JMV12345. How would you compare your top 10 from 2023 to your top 10 in 2024? Also, do you have any books, your eye on any books in 2025 that have the potential to top some of the great books that you've read over the last couple of years? So it's funny, because a friend of mine asked me the same question recently, and I had such a fantastic reading year in 2023. I read The Road, I started The Three Body Problem, I finished the First Law trilogy, and I read Frankenstein, which is one of my all-time top 5 books. So yeah, 2023 was absolutely amazing. But when I compare my top 10 list from last year to this year, I've got to say 2024 has been one of my best reading years ever. When I think about the books that I've read this year, I've read Lonesome Dove, beautiful. 11/22/63 by Stephen King is actually my favorite Stephen King book that I've ever read. The Dark Forest, Misery by Stephen King, also the Farseer trilogy, and I'm currently reading through that, and I'm absolutely loving it. I read The Exorcist. I read Hyperion. I read The Sword of Kaigan. Like, the lineup has just been absolutely incredible. And honestly, the overall quality of the books that I've read this year just feels much stronger. There are a few books that didn't make it in my top 10 list this year that would have easily been in the top 10 last year. So yeah, definitely 2024 has been a standout year for reading, but I think 2025 might be better because next year there's a few things that I'm really excited to read. After raving so much about Lonesome Dove, a lot of you have recommended that I read East of Eden. Which I've never read, so I'm really looking forward to diving into that. I also want to read more fantasy as well. Nothing helps me escape into another reality quite like a great fantasy book with some heavy world building. And so I'm thinking about maybe more Brandon Sanderson. I'm especially excited for Joe Abercrombie's new series. He's got a new book coming out next year called The Devils, and by then I hope to have finished all of the First Law books, including the Age of Madness trilogy. So yeah, I'm just really excited for a lot of fantasy. And you see, like behind me over here, I've got like all the Penguin classics up there. I've read a lot of them, but I'd like to dive into more of those as well. So honestly, I'm always excited about what's on my TBR list. Every year just seems to get a bit better. And I think a big part of that is thanks to this community that we've built here, because all of you share these incredible book recommendations, and it just keeps my list growing and growing and growing. And it just makes me excited to read more. I'm always excited. I'm always excited to read, like, because I know even if I'm not really enjoying a book right now, I think, yeah, but then I've got that other one coming up that I've been looking forward to, and then I've got the other one and another one. As a reader, you can never not be excited because the amazing books that are out there are endless. Next question is from my good mate, Danny Matson. And he says, do you play any video games, Jay? And if so, tell us your top 5 or so. And he also says, when you hear the word Swansea, what comes to mind? All right, cool. Yeah. I've got a good answer for this. So I talk about the video games first. I recently have gotten back into playing video games after a really long break. So I played a lot during my school days, but back when I was in high school or senior school, as we call it. And then for about 10 or 15 years, um, I stopped. And then a few years ago, I got a PlayStation and I've been loving it, mate. Great thing about not having played games for so many years is that there was like a massive back catalog for me to dive into. Like, for example, until like a few years ago, I didn't know what Skyrim was. So I played Skyrim and I was like, whoa, this is amazing, even though it was like 10 years old or something. But if I had to put together a top five, maybe six list of favorite games, this is what I would say off the top of my head. All right. So definitely, definitely, I have to include The Witcher 3. It is just this incredible open world that feels so full of life. Uh, a lot of times when you play an open world game, for example, Skyrim, you go to the cities and the cities feel kind of like empty and, yeah. So I love The Witcher 3. I love Geralt. He's a fantastic character, which is funny because I'm not really into the TV show or the books, but the game, just amazing. I sometimes I think about it. I think about The Witcher 3 and I think about it as though these are experiences that I had in my real life. Like what it's so crazy. I think about The Witcher all the time. Fallout 4 is another just incredible game. I've never played New Vegas, but Fallout 4 completely immersed me in its world. Oh man, I just love that game so much. The Last of Us Part 2, I know that can be divisive, but the storytelling in The Last of Us Part 2 is for me just next level. Some of the best experiences that I've had in any medium. I just loved the way that the story was told. I'm not going to give any spoilers, obviously, but the way in which the story was told, more than anything, is what really took me by surprise and just I loved it. I loved it. And I know not everyone did love it if you've played that game. A lot of people, they liked the first one, but they didn't like the second one because of the reason that I loved it. Another great game is Disco Elysium. This is like a classic RPG where you play a detective who is just a total mess, and the choices that are available to you are absolutely phenomenal. It's the funniest game I've ever played. It's also really emotional as well. But yeah, I just like the amount of decisions that you can make. You can give your character a redemptive arc, or you can just let him spiral into just chaos. You can turn this guy into a fascist or a communist. It's 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 in depth. Next game I really loved, and I have to mention this one, is Red Dead Redemption 2. This is top three. I think Arthur Morgan is my favorite character from any game. Yeah, he is. I love him. I love him. I love him like a brother. What other games? Oh, I just finished recently Baldur's Gate 3. And that was fantastic. That's another game where you get a lot of choices as well, and you can decide how your story ends, and all of the decisions that you make have an impact on the story. I guess what I really like is like open worlds with a lot of choices that you can make. That's really the thing that I like the most about gaming. If you'd like, I can start including more about the games that I'm playing or the movies that I'm watching in my monthly wrap-ups. I definitely want to keep this channel all about books, right? I'm not going to deviate to talking about gaming or movies, even though, there may be a bit more popular topics to cover on YouTube. I definitely want to keep it all about books, but I'm just saying in the monthly wrap-ups, maybe I can talk about some other things, just like, oh, this month I played this game, or this month I watched these movies, or something like that. And to answer your other question, what do I think when I think of Swansea? Right, this is going to be a mental story. This is going to be a mental story with a twist ending. All right, you ready? So when I finished school, I went with, I got hired on an apprenticeship. And they sent us to Swansea to do like this kind of like team building thing, where we were just there for a week, maybe it was a week or 2 weeks or something like that. And we were doing stuff like kayaking and rock climbing and abseiling and stuff like that. We're like going deep into caves and, there was a lot of activities that we were doing. Anyway, I remember being really nervous about the abseiling because I was a little bit like afraid of heights and it was really high. And so I really had to trust that I would lean back and everything would be okay. And so everyone's cheering me on. And so I started to I leaned back and just went, just do it, just do it. So I leaned back and started to abseil down this rock face. And I was feeling pretty good. And then I noticed that all the cheering stopped. And then you're not going to guess the ending of this story. I promise you. Uh, I noticed that all the cheering stopped, right? And then I was like, just going down, going down. And then I got down to the bottom and everyone was just dead silent, just looking around and then I thought that I'd done something wrong. And so I was looking around, confused, and the guy that was driving the van and was sort of like taking us through all these activities that we were doing turned around to I said, what happened? What happened? And then he turned around to me and he said, they just hit the World Trade Center. And I was a teenager. And so I didn't even know what the World Trade Center was. I really didn't have very much clue about like New York City other than like the Empire State Building and stuff like that. So I was going, what is the World Trade? What is the World Trade? What happened? Who did what? And I mean, talk about a loss of innocence, right? That for everyone. Um, and so, yeah, honestly, that's what I think of when I think of Swansea. The rest of Swansea kind of felt surreal. We went into the town a few times, and the people in Wales were always so friendly. I've been back. To Wales a few times since. I've been to Cardiff, I've been to Abergavenny, and I always have a great time. Welsh people are just really nice, very good singers as well, Welsh people, and yeah, I've got a lot of affection for the Welsh. Yeah, yeah, mad. I know that wasn't what you were expecting, but yeah, I mean, they say everyone remembers where they were at that time. I was in Swansea. Sorry to bring down the mood. I'm just being honest. I'm just answering all of these questions as honestly as I can. So, numerous classroom says, have you read the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson? And if not, are you going to? And then put in brackets, you definitely should. How do you read so many books when having a full-time job? So I feel like I answered the other part of the question a little bit earlier, right? I just read a lot and I listen to audiobooks and I make use of my Kindle on my phone and the Kindle app on my phone, and I have a Kindle as well. So yeah, I'm just reading all the time basically. I don't really watch that much television, a little bit, but not that much, and I don't even watch as many movies as I used to. So yeah, I've just got more time on my hands than I used to. So the other part of the question was the Stormlight Archive. I have not read the Stormlight Archive yet. But I do have the first 3 books. I plan to dive into them next year for sure. I have to confess, though, that I've read the Mistborn trilogy and I thought it was just okay. I absolutely loved the magic system. It's probably the best magic system I've ever read. That was fantastic, but I just didn't connect with the main characters that much. I wasn't really a fan of Kelsier. I don't know if I was supposed to be, and I didn't really care for Vin that much either. There were a couple of characters that I really liked, I suppose. Breeze was probably my favorite character in the book. I just liked his sort of attitude that he had. I also enjoyed the character who could store strength by resting for long periods of time. He really stood out to me. But overall, because I didn't really like the main characters that much, I found myself caring less about the story. But with that being said, I've heard that the characters in the Stormlight archive maybe a bit more developed. And so I'm really excited to give that a go. I'm sure I'll end up loving it. No doubt I'm going to be reading it at some point next year. Next question is from my mate, Wera. She's another booktuber who, I really like her channel. And she says, what's your biggest goal for the next 10K? Well, I'll tell you what, Wera, why don't you tell me, mate? Because I saw you recently hit 20,000 subscribers and I went, good for her, And then I checked just before I made this video, and you're on about 26, and probably by the time this video comes out, you'll be at about 30. So I don't know, why don't you tell me? Even though you started your channel after me, about a year after me, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not even a little bit jealous. You can tell, can't you? No, but seriously, congratulations. You are doing numbers. I knew you would as well. I told you. Yeah, I was like, listen, you're going to get to 10K before me. I didn't know you'd get to bloody 30K. I'll tell you that, before the end of the year. So yeah, to answer your question, for the future of the channel, I really want to focus on building a stronger sense of like community. That's why I'm going to be setting up a Discord server at the start of next year, where, we can all hang out, we can share book recommendations, do read-alongs, and just have a lot of fun. The YouTube comment section, I think, is really great. For you to give me feedback and me maybe to answer a couple of your questions. But for more in-depth conversations where it feels like we can all contribute to one another, I think a dedicated Discord server is the way to go. Also, I'd like to maybe do more book reviews. Honestly, the most fun that I've ever had on this channel was reviewing the Dark Tower multiverse. And so I'd love to recreate that energy with other series or even standalone books as well. But most importantly, I just want to get to know my audience a bit better so that we can all just share our love for books together. But yeah. Another great question. Next question from Dylan Davis. He says, have you always been into reading, or is this something that maybe you started later in life and then you grew to love reading? So like a lot of people, I think I read a lot when I was in school. Back then, it was mostly Goosebumps in my preteen and early teen years. And then later, I got into James Herbert as well. And I was just absolutely obsessed with his books for a while. And then after school, I started moving around a little bit. I started moving around from country to country. I lived in Spain. I lived in Ireland. Now I live in the US. And sort of during that time, I read a bit less. Probably, I would say, maybe like a book a month. But everything changed in 2020 during lockdown. And I think this is a common story for a lot of people. That's when I really fell back in love with reading in a big way. And I went from reading 10 books a year to maybe 60 or 70 books a year. And then after starting this channel, my reading just skyrocketed. So yeah, I've always been a reader, but the last 4 or 5 years, I think it's just been on a whole new level, and I'm reading more now than ever before. Next question from Iskra Jasmine. She says, if it's not too personal, does your scar have a cool story? How dare you? No, you mean this scar here, right? It does have a story, quite a violent story. If you'd like to hear it, yeah, yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you about it. So this happened when I was out celebrating getting approved for my US visa. I was out drinking with my friends in England, probably drank too much, and somehow I got separated from my friends while I was walking home late at night. And that's when I came across this group of blokes who were acting really threatening towards this other fella. There were 3 of them, and they had this little bloke pinned up against a wall. They were kind of like surrounding him. And at this time, I was probably 28, 29, something like that. And I suppose these young lads, they looked about 21. And for some reason, I decided that it would be a good idea to intervene. And so I kind of danced over to him. I didn't literally dance. I walked over to him and I was like, okay, here we go. Kind of pump myself up. They still wasn't aware of me at this point. And I walked up behind them and I went, hello, boys. Hello, boys. And they all turned around to me like, kind of like lions, you know, they seen the prey. You know, like, who's this lunatic that's inserting himself into this situation? Like, this didn't need to happen. And meanwhile, the little fella that they had cornered was like looking over their shoulders and it was like, hello. You know, yeah, it was like a little glimmer of hope entered into his eyes. Like, and so I walked over to him and I went, hello. And I grabbed him and I pulled him towards me and I said, hey, let's go get some Chinese food. And so I tried to pull him away, but they did not want to let me do that. And so before I knew it, I was getting punched a lot. I was getting lots of punches in bunches, you know? And one of them was grabbing me. Another one was trying to like hold down my hands. Another one was like choking me and just trying to like boom, boom, boom. I managed to throw a couple of punches back. I'm pretty sure that I landed a couple, but it was, like I say, I was kind of drunk, so I was a little bit sloppy. And then I just kept thinking to myself as they were punching me and holding me and grabbing me, all I thought to myself was like, do not go down. Do not go down on the ground. If you go down on the ground, really bad things can start to happen to you. So I was just sort of like focused on staying up, you know? And then eventually, they decided to leave it like I'd had enough kind of thing, you know? And they kind of like jogged off. I don't know if they were worried that the police might show up or maybe some of my friends were going to come around the corner. You know, things like that can always happen in a town. So I think that they sort of thought, all right. And then they kind of like ran off, you know? And you want to know the really weird thing? I turned around to the little fella that had been surrounded and he was standing there looking at me like, I looked him up and down, and I don't mean to make this too graphic, but I had blood just running down my face, right? Just everywhere. And I looked to the little fella, and he was standing there like, and I looked him up and down, and he didn't have a scratch. He didn't have a scratch. He didn't have a scratch on him. He was just. I went, did you throw a punch? And he was like, oh. I'm not. I don't really know how to fight very well. And I was like, did you? Oh man. I mean, all right. And he went, thanks. And I went, yeah, you're welcome. And then I went to the hospital. And then I got stitched up. So you know, no good deed goes unpunished. I do think about it sometimes, and I think about, you know, how lucky I was to escape with just that, just a, you know, a couple of bumps and bruises and stuff like that, you know, because these things can go way worse. And so yeah, part of me is glad that I did it, because I'm the sort of person where if I would have walked home and just left him, I would have been thinking about it for weeks. I probably would have still been waking up at 3 a.m. going, oh God, why didn't I? You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, was it clever to do it? Not really, but yeah, if I didn't do it, there's no winning in that scenario. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's the story of how I got this little scar. I don't hate it. I think it gives me a bit of character, you know. Plus, I got a fun story out of it, and that's what life is, isn't it? You know, just stories. I'm sorry if you thought you was going to have like a really upbeat video. Again, I'm just being honest. Like I'm from a working class town in England, so some of my stories are going to be a little bit darker. Next question from Jamie G. So Jamie G asks, "Who are your top 3 YouTubers? Not necessarily booktubers." All right, another good question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to split this into non-booktubers, and then I'm going to talk about my favorite booktubers. So non-booktubers is, I really like this channel called Curious Archive. So this is one of those channels that I just love to watch whilst I'm eating my lunch. So I don't know if you do that as well, but this channel, he does these deep dives into storytelling and world building, and why certain stories connect with us. This really has nothing to do with books so much as just the concept of world building, whether that be in, like, it can be in books, but it can be in movies or Dungeons and Dragons campaigns or video games. For example, he has a couple of videos about, he has one called moldy world building, and it talks about how the setting of a world in decay is so interesting because it suggests fallen civilizations. And then he uses examples like Elden Ring and Star Wars, where, you know, the engineers are like building things out of scraps that have been left behind by previous civilizations. He also has another video where he talks about why he hates elves in fantasy fiction and why they're rarely the main character, because they represent the kind of like social elite in our world. And I found that to be really interesting as well. He talks about, you know, in some stories, what happens when gods die. Just really interesting video essayist about world building. Another channel that I really enjoy is Man Carrying Thing. So this guy these days mostly does comedy skits, and it's kind of like observational humor. He takes something that's happening in the world, usually something that's happening in like the media, like pop culture, and he does satirical sketches on the absurdity that we see in the headlines sometimes. He kind of pokes fun at popular culture and movies, and actually he does talk about books as well sometimes. It's kind of annoying, like he's one of these like multi-talented people. Do you know what I mean? Like whatever he turns his hand to, oh, he talks about books. Oh, and he's funny. Oh, you know, like, all right, we get it. You're talented. Like some of us just have to, you know, just do like top 10 lists and stuff, you know. Another channel that I watch pretty much daily is Limmy Twitch clips. And so who is Limmy? Limmy is a Scottish comedian who used to have a BBC show, but now he just streams on Twitch. And they release like the highlights on a YouTube channel of his Twitch account. So if you picture Limmy as this grouchy Glaswegian Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's like a Scottish version of Larry David, kind of. He's got a very dark sense of humor. He has quite absurd takes. He plays video games that are not really mainstream, you know? He plays these unusual video games and reacts to them. And he also reacts to YouTube clips from 1980s game shows. It's brilliant. I love it. As for the booktubers, so this is really hard, right? But because there's just so many good ones, but I'm just going to talk about the ones that first come to me. Who are my favorite booktubers? I've already mentioned Wera. So Viera's channel focuses on deep dives into fantasy series rather than individual book reviews. So she'll tackle series like the Farseer trilogy and share her reactions to it like book by book kind of thing, you know, giving us like a progression of her thoughts as she goes through, but she does it all in one video. So these videos are filmed over the course of a couple of weeks, and then we get to watch her journey unfold in like a compilation video. So that's a lot of fun. I really like that style of video that she does. She's also a huge fan of The Witcher, And like I said, I love the games. So if you love the books or the TV show, then her content, I think, is going to be right up your alley. She's also Polish herself. So she's got this special connection with The Witcher because The Witcher is rooted in like Polish culture and Eastern European folklore. So I think it makes her perspective, it gives a little bit of authenticity to her perspective and it makes it a bit more interesting to see. Another channel that I really like is Two to Ramble. And this is a couple of lads. It's like a mixture of a podcast and book review YouTube channel where these two friends suggest books to each other. They read them, they report back on their thoughts, and they do spoiler reviews and non-spoiler reviews of the books that they read. They also dive into topics like the publishing industry, and they have discussions about whether you can separate the artist from the art, and they just sort of cover everything from like a bird's eye view, just books in general, all bookish discussions. But I think that the real highlight of their channel, the thing that I like the most anyway, is their chemistry with each other. So watching these two lads, it kind of feels like you're hanging out with two close friends. You know, I know that sounds a little bit parasocial. They're so personable. So you feel like when you're watching them, you're the third friend in the conversation. And they've just got a good vibe, you know? Next channel I love is Bookborn. I don't know if this is a strange thing to say. Bookborn has the friendliest face I've ever seen. Seriously, if I won the lottery and I had to, I've got to give this lottery ticket to someone for some reason, I think I would trust her to hold on to the ticket for me. And that trust would be rewarded, I think. She gives off that kind of vibe, that she's just a good person. Her channel is fantastic. She focuses almost exclusively on fantasy books and series. She creates really thoughtful video essays on topics like why plot armor can actually be a good thing, or she has videos where she compares Game of Thrones to The First Law. And you can tell when you're watching her videos that she puts a ton of effort into planning out her videos, researching her videos, perfecting the editing. And I think that makes her content feel really polished, maybe more than any other. One of the channels that really inspires me, another channel that inspires me as well, is Talking Story. Talking Story, the main guy is John. He often does episodes with, I believe it's his son, though I could be wrong about that. I'm 90% sure that he's hosting this with his son. And their interactions are really wholesome. Sometimes his wife joins in as well. And it just gives you a real sense of who this dude is as a person. And honestly, it just seems like a great guy. I think we also have very similar taste in books as well, which makes his recommendations really valuable to me. And I suppose the thing that I notice about all of my favorite booktubers now that I talk about it is that they don't just give good recommendations, but they seem like nice people and people that I just genuinely would like to hang out with. So yeah, they're probably my top 4. Also, let me just give a quick shout out to another channel that I really enjoy. And it's a channel that used to just be like a subscriber to my channel. And then he let me know that he was going to set up his own channel because I think he liked some of my Dark Tower stuff. And so he decided that he wanted to do that with a different series, which is Terry Pratchett's Discworld. And the name of the channel is The BookThing. And he's this Irish fella. He's got under 1,000 subscribers. I think it would be cool if we could get him above 1,000 subscribers. That'd be really cool. But yeah, he's a nice bloke. And so if you like Terry Pratchett, then I would say this is the place to be. Another one of these people that are like just a good guy, you know, just fun to watch his videos, especially if you like Terry Pratchett. Okay, so another question. I was wondering, sorry, this is from Gillian Summers. I was wondering what underrated modern author is your favorite, or also, maybe you have a modern author that you really enjoy, but you feel as though they deserve more attention. Really good question. So, this is actually a tough question for me because I read a lot of popular fiction. So, a lot of the stuff that I read is fairly mainstream, but here are a few books that I think deserve maybe a bit more attention. How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. Is a speculative novel that kind of weaves together stories of grief and survival in the aftermath of this deadly Arctic plague that just spreads across the world. Um, so that's really interesting. Yeah, just a collection of short stories. Some of them were really touching. One of them made me absolutely bawl my eyes out, but that's not hard for me, honestly. So next book that I think is fairly popular but doesn't get as much attention as it should is This Thing Between Us by Gus Marino. This is like a cosmic horror about a grieving widower. It's about a device, kind of like one of those home assistants. I'm not going to say the name because it will trigger all your devices at home. But yeah, one of these home assistants that you can buy where it starts to make deliveries for them that they never asked for. It starts to take more and more of an active role in their life. And then it's not long before things start getting really creepy. Lastly, City of Thieves by David Benioff. That feels like it should be considered as more of like a modern classic, but I just rarely hear anyone talking about it, which surprises me. It's a story about the siege of Leningrad and these two prisoners in the Russian military are tasked with finding a dozen eggs for their general for his daughter's birthday or wedding day. So basically, they need to go around Leningrad as it's under siege, and it's a really dark and dismal atmosphere, as you can imagine, right, during World War II. And they're just trying to find eggs. Like, where can we find eggs? So it's kind of it's funny in places. It's really funny in places, but it's also very dark as well. But yeah, I just never hear anyone talking about that book. It might be because it's written by David Benioff, and people still feel a bit bitter about the Game of Thrones ending. That could be it. So Bobby Ray asks, that's a great name, by the way, Bobby Ray, so American. You are definitely American. Bobby Ray asks, have you ever experienced a supernatural event? I'm about to tell you a very personal and a very scary story about something that happened to me when I was living in Spain. So I want you to picture this. I'm in my apartment alone. I have my own apartment. I'm living in Spain. I'm living in Alicante. And I am watching a DVD of Starsky and Hutch. My stories are really strange. They have weird little details in them. But my friends were asking me to come out. You know, it was Saturday night, and normally I would go out on a weekend when I lived in Spain. But for this reason, for this night, I just wasn't really feeling it. And so I turned on the DVD of Starsky and Hutch, and I fell asleep. And then I woke up, and the title screen was playing on the TV. I had this tiny little TV. Do you remember DVD title screens when it was like play movie, extras, chapters, behind the scenes? You remember that? And it used to have a bit of music. Well, anyway, I woke up and I could hear the title screen. So obviously I'd fallen asleep while watching this movie. And I don't know if any of you have sleep paralysis. Do any of you have sleep paralysis, I wonder? Or do you know what it is? And have you ever heard of a sleep paralysis demon? Um, well, I had one of those. So as I've sort of like opened my eyes, I realize that I have sleep paralysis, right? Sleep paralysis is when you wake up but you can't move your body. And this isn't the first time I've had it. I've had it lots of times in my life. And this time was really extreme though. I just couldn't move. And I was just laying there, slowly opening my eyes, just kind of, oh, I can't move. I can't move. You know, start to panic a little bit. Anyway, I managed to move my head just a little bit. And I just kind of turned my head. And then as I turned my head, there was a little girl leaning into the room. And then just as I turned around to look at her, she went, and she moved back into the corridor in my apartment. And then I was sort of went, I need to move. I need to move. I need to move. I want to move. And I wanted to just be able to move my arm. So I was just going, come on, move, 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 move. And then I thought I was just about to be able to move. And this man jumped on me. And I felt the full weight of him on my chest, and I felt his knees on my thighs, and his face was so close to me that I couldn't really see him. Like, you know, when something's so close, it's blurred. You kind of have to go like that. So I was just looking at his face, and he was on top of me like this, and he's just going, and I could feel his breath, you know. And then he goes, I'm going to be hiding somewhere in the apartment. You have to come and find me. And then he just stayed there for longer. And I was just going. And then he jumped off and he ran away. I get goosebumps when I talk about it, you know? And then I just went. And then I could move. So I don't know if you've ever had sleep paralysis, but that's kind of how it happens, right? You can't move. You can move a little bit, and then you can move all of a sudden. And that's how it happened for me. And so then I just ran around the apartment. I was like opening every closet, every room. Like I say, I lived there by myself, but there was a couple of bedrooms that I had, and I was like looking everywhere, every place that anyone could possibly be. Not because I believed in it, because I knew that it was like kind of like a dream that I'd had. You know, I didn't actually believe. I mean, me talking about it now, I don't actually believe that there was a real demon, right? There was in my home, or that there was a ghost or anything like that. I didn't believe that. But when it happens, when it's actually happened, you can't help it. There's no way I could have gone back to sleep without just double checking, you know? And so, yeah, I just ran around the whole apartment, opening doors. And yeah, that was really scary. That was really a scary thing. But yeah, sleep paralysis demons, man. Sleep paralysis is scary by itself, but when you get a sleep paralysis demon, that'll mess you up. That'll mess you up. So yeah, I don't know if I can say that's a supernatural event. Some people think that it is, but me personally, I think I was like halfway between dreaming and waking up. I was having like a waking dream kind of thing. I think it was more like that, but scary though. Next question, Cliff's Dark Gems. This is another channel that I really like as well. Does a lot of fantasy and horror. And he asks, have you ever been a guest on a YouTube show? This is funny because this is kind of like a little bit of a inside joke between me and Cliff. You've asked me a couple of times to do a live stream with you, and mate, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I actually feel really guilty because we haven't done it yet. And I definitely want to. I love your channel, and I'd love to do a live stream. I have to admit, right, I am a little bit of a procrastinator when it comes to things especially things I've never done before. And I've never done a live stream, and so I'm not sure if I'd be any good at it. What I need to do is I need to figure out how to use this camera and this mic and everything for a live stream, and what program I need to use and all that kind of thing. And then we will set it up on YouTube. Next question is from Little Dog's Household Staff. You asked, do you have a PO box to send books and gifts to? That's a really lovely, thoughtful question, and I don't have a PO box, honestly. The main reason is that if someone sent me a book, I would feel obligated to read that book immediately, right? Because knowing that someone had spent their money that they'd earned and they bought something for me, I would feel pressured not just to read it, but to definitely finish it. and then give it like a proper review and everything like that. And I would have to do that even if it was something that I'm not really enjoying. And so while that could lead to discovering some amazing books that I wouldn't have picked up otherwise, it could also mean that I spend time on books that aren't really like a great fit for me. And so, as much as like I say, I really appreciate the question and the kind intention behind it. I really hate the idea of letting people down. What I am planning on doing, though, and maybe you might like this, is I'm planning on setting up a system where people can vote on the books that they'd like me to read. And then we can all read them collectively as a group on Discord. And so I'm still working out all of the mechanics, but I'm going to be starting this very early next year. Either it's going to be January or February. And this way, you will have input into the books that I read, but without feeling the need to spend any money and sending anything to me, which I think is a better option for everyone, right? Because then we get the best of both worlds. But anyway, I just want to say once again, thank you all so much for subscribing. Thanks for the amazing questions that you took time to ask me some questions. If you haven't already subscribed, I hope that you will, because we've got some really big plans coming up in 2025 where this channel, I think, is going to go from feeling like a YouTube channel with content to hopefully more of like a community next year when we can all just kind of hang out together. So I've got a video coming out soon about the launch of the Discord, and I want to make it as fun for everyone as possible. So any suggestions that you have for the Discord, please let me know. I've never managed the Discord before, so I know I'm going to mess up. I'm going to fall on my face a couple of times, but at least we can make it funny. Thank you all so much for the 10,000 subscribers. Sometimes I joke around and I try and take things a bit lightly, but really, I couldn't have dreamed that the channel would grow to the size that it is now when I first started out with those first couple of videos. And all I want to do is just keep making entertaining videos for you all, create a friendly space where we can all just have fun. And I hope to do more of that in the coming year. And if you'd like to know more about the plans for this channel that I have in 2025, then you can click up here. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And as always, happy reading.